I need to get this off my chest before I talk myself out of it. Last night, my boss took me to what he called a relationship-building dinner with one of our biggest clients, and halfway through the meal, the man reached under the table, grabbed my hand, and whispered something that made my stomach drop. I'm still shaking as I type this, but if I don't put it somewhere, I'll go crazy. The place was one of those sleek downtown restaurants where the lights are dim enough to hide flaws, but bright enough to show the logo etched into every wine glass. I wasn't supposed to be there originally. My boss had accidentally looped me into the calendar invite earlier that week with a casual, "Good chance for you to see how these things are done." At first, I took it as mentorship. Now I know better. When we arrived, the host led us past rows of velvet booths to a table in the back corner. My boss laughed too loudly at the maitre d's joke, the kind of laugh that sounds rehearsed. The client, Mr. H., was already seated, a wide frame stuffed into a tailored suit, gold ring gleaming as he raised his glass. He didn't stand, just looked me up and down like I was another item on the menu. My boss introduced me as the young talent who keeps our decks sharp, which made me feel like a prop instead of a professional. The meal started innocently enough. Small talk about quarterly numbers, a toast to continued partnership. I forced a polite smile and tried to focus on the tuna tartare in front of me. But then the conversation shifted. Mr. H. leaned closer, his voice dropping just below the hum of background jazz. "You know," he said, eyes flicking to my boss, "future leaders are made at dinners like these." My boss just sipped his wine and nodded. I tried to keep my breathing steady, reminding myself to stay professional. But then, as I reached for my water glass, his hand shot across under the tablecloth, thick fingers wrapped around mine, pressing down with just enough force that it wasn't a mistake. My body froze. He leaned in, breath heavy with Cabernet, and whispered, "Your promotion depends on how flexible you are after dinner." For a second, I thought I misheard. My boss didn't flinch. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look at me. He just adjusted his cufflinks and launched into a story about golf, as if nothing had happened. That silence, his deliberate choice not to see, cut deeper than the client's words. I pulled my hand back slowly, careful not to make a scene. My heart was slamming against my ribs, but I forced a neutral expression. My phone was on my lap, screen glowing faintly. Without breaking eye contact, I thumbed the record button. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'm not sure I understand, Mr. H. Could you repeat what you just said?" The table went quiet for a beat. He smirked, swirling his wine. "You heard me," he said softly. Then louder, I said, "Flexibility is key in business." My boss chuckled like it was just another quip about market conditions. I wanted to throw up. Instead, I let the recorder run and excused myself to the restroom. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Flushed cheeks, clenched jaw, pupils blown wide. I splashed water on my face, hands trembling so hard I almost dropped my phone. When I checked the screen, the recording timer was still running. That gave me just enough strength to walk back out and finish the dinner without showing my panic. The rest of the night was a blur. I remember snippets. The client bragging about a new house in the Hamptons, my boss nodding along, the waiter refilling glasses none of us needed, but mostly I remember the weight in my chest, the certainty that I'd just been cornered into something I hadn't agreed to. At the end, as we stood to leave, Mr. H. put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing just a fraction too long. "Looking forward to our follow-up," he murmured. My boss didn't meet my eyes. Outside, the air was cold, sharp enough to sting. I wrapped my coat tighter, phone still in my pocket, recording proof of what had just happened. My boss hailed a cab, gave me a half smile, and said, "You handled yourself well tonight. Remember, this client is crucial." Then he closed the door behind me before I could answer. I went home and sat in the dark for hours, replaying every second, the ring digging into my hand, the whisper that made my skin crawl, the silence of the man who was supposed to have my back. By the time dawn crept in through the blinds, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to bury this. I wasn't going to let them write the story for me. If this kind of story matters, upvote so more people hear it. I'm documenting every detail. Because last night wasn't just a dinner. It was the first move in a game they thought I didn't know how to play. Everyone always asks, "Why didn't you just leave?" And I wish I could give the simple answer they want. The truth is, walking out would have cost more than my own job. That's how they designed it. The renewal on the table was worth $8.7 million over 3 years. It wasn't just numbers in a spreadsheet. It meant payroll for 20 people on my team, resources for a product line we'd been building for months, and the only shot some junior analysts had at getting promoted before their student loans swallowed them. If I stormed out, if I caused a scene, they could spin it as me jeopardizing the deal. The fallout wouldn't just hit me. It would ripple through every desk on my floor. That knowledge sat in my chest heavier than the wine I barely touched that night. So I played along in silence, at least on the surface. But silence doesn't mean inaction. The first thing I did the next morning was open my laptop and comb through every policy buried in our corporate intranet. HR guidelines, compliance manuals, procurement rules, pages and pages of dry text no one reads until they're desperate. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for leverage. My inbox told its own story. At 1:17 a.m., my boss had sent a follow-up strategy email to himself, CCing me by accident, or maybe not. The subject line was innocuous. Next steps with H. But the body was a single line. Confirm hotel bar availability. I stared at it, pulse thudding in my ears. This wasn't spontaneous. This was coordinated. I scrolled further back. There were patterns. Calendar invites scheduled for 9:58 p.m., always labeled prep. Threads where my boss told me not to include legal, uncertain communications because it would slow things down. Slack messages disappearing from shared channels, replaced with private DMs like, "We'll talk offline. Don't log this yet." At the time, I thought it was sloppy project management. Now I saw it for what it was. Insulation. They were building layers of plausible deniability. The small tells stood out too. A hotel upgrade receipt I hadn't asked for, showing my name attached to a suite reservation that was canceled last minute. A dinner bill charged not to the client's corporate account, but to his personal Amex, the kind with a custom gold crest. Every piece looked harmless alone. Together they formed a lattice. I tried to work through the day, but every click of my keyboard felt like a countdown. Around noon, a notification popped up on my calendar. Post-dinner recap. Location: Westbridge Hotel Bar. My boss had added it at 11:46 a.m. No agenda, no invitees except me and the client. My stomach flipped. There it was, the trap, written in black and white. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forwarded the invite to my personal email, then exported the ICS file and saved it in 3 places. Documentation timestamped. If they wanted me in that bar, they'd have to answer why. The hours crawled. At 4:00, my boss strolled by my desk, tapping the wood with 2 knuckles. "Big night," he said, like a coach before a game. "Remember, flexibility." My throat went dry, but I forced a smile, nodding like the eager junior I was supposed to be. Inside, rage was burning holes in my composure. I left the office at 6 bong sharp, walking the long way to the hotel. My phone stayed in my pocket, recording again. Every footstep sounded too loud. Every streetlight buzzed like a warning. By the time I reached the Westbridge, I had made another decision. I wouldn't walk in blind. The lobby smelled of polished wood and overpriced whiskey. As I crossed toward the bar entrance, I scanned the ceiling. One security camera blinked above the front desk. Another pointed down the hallway that led to the restrooms. The bar itself, though, had a broken lens hanging loose, black tape around the housing, conveniently blind, but the hallway wasn't. I ordered a sparkling water at the counter and positioned myself on the edge of the bar, close enough to the hallway door that sound would carry to the functioning camera's mic range. My phone stayed recording inside my clutch. My hands were steady now, calculated. They thought they were pulling me into a corner. What they didn't realize was that I'd already started drawing a map of the exits. That night wasn't about survival anymore. It was about strategy. And for the first time, I felt like I might be able to turn their own game against them. They thought they'd picked the perfect trap. A dim bar half hidden from the lobby, with a broken security camera and staff trained to look the other way when VIPs wanted privacy. What they didn't realize was that I'd already spotted the hallway lens, still humming faintly, its red light blinking like an ally in the dark. Mr. H was already there when I walked in. He'd claimed a corner booth, sprawled out like it belonged to him. A half-empty glass of bourbon sat on the table. My boss was beside him, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, playing the relaxed insider. He waved me over, the smile on his face tight, like he was rehearsing calm. Glad you made it," he said. I slid into the booth, deliberately choosing the edge where my voice would carry to the hallway. My clutch stayed in my lap, phone recording. My water glass caught the reflection of the neon bar sign, the letters flickering as if the building itself wanted to expose them. Mr. H leaned forward almost immediately. His hand reached across the table, heavy and damp, fingers grazing mine again. This time, I didn't flinch. I let him hold on just long enough for the contact to be unmistakable, then pulled back slowly, folding my hands in my lap. "You don't need to be shy," he murmured, voice low. "You know how this works. Promotions don't just come from PowerPoints." My boss chuckled softly, swirling his drink. "We're all adults here," he said, like it was a joke, like it erased what had just been implied. My heart was pounding, but my words came out clear, clipped. "Let me be absolutely clear," I said, voice steady. "If you think my career is tied to anything outside of work performance, you're mistaken." The air thickened. Mr. H's smile faltered for the first time. My boss shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mr. H leaned back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax," he said loudly, glancing at the bartender. "I was talking about adaptability in business." I let the silence sit, the recorder capturing every word, every pivot. We stayed another 45 minutes going through the motions. They tried to pull me back into casual banter, but I answered in clipped, professional phrases, each one designed to sound harmless and to remind them I wasn't intimidated. My boss dropped phrases like team player and future leader, his eyes darting between me and Mr. H, as if trying to gauge if the performance was convincing. When the check came, Mr. H slid his black card across the table with a flourish. I watched closely. Instead of the company account, it was his personal Amex again. Another detail, another breadcrumb. Walking out of the hotel into the sharp night air, I felt my hands trembling, not from fear, but from restraint. I'd drawn my line, said the words out loud, and forced them onto the record. And I knew what would come next. The retaliation hit before sunrise. At 7:42 a.m., a meeting invite landed in my inbox. Q4 Renewal Deck Review. Attendees. Boss, client, senior VP. My name wasn't on it. A project I'd built from the ground up, months of analysis, hours of slides polished until my eyes burned, and suddenly I was not required. My boss messaged me a few minutes later. "Don't take it personally. We just want to reduce distractions." Distractions. That was the word he chose. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the screen. Every instinct screamed at me to march into his office, to slam the door and demand answers. But I didn't. I took a breath, saved the message, and added it to my growing folder. They thought they'd sidelined me. What they didn't realize was that they'd just handed me the next piece of evidence, and I wasn't collecting evidence to protect myself anymore. I was building something bigger. Revenge wasn't a plan. Not at first. It was a policy I finally read to the last line. After the bar, after being cut from the renewal deck, I spent an entire weekend buried in PDFs no one ever voluntarily opens. HR's harassment policy, the compliance handbook, Procurement's vendor ethics clauses, each one written in soulless corporate jargon, but underneath it all was something they never expected me to notice: loopholes that worked in my favor. The first lever was hidden in HR's policy: any report of misconduct constitutes protected activity. That phrase meant retaliation against me, even subtle moves like cutting me from the deck, was already a violation. All I had to do was log it. So on Monday morning at 8:12 a.m., I filed a formal complaint through the ethics portal. Short, factual, no emotion. Client engaged in inappropriate physical contact and verbal implication during business dinner. Manager present. Subsequent retaliation observed. Time-stamped, locked, untouchable. The second lever was buried in compliance. Employees must disclose any conflict of interest, including undisclosed financial or personal arrangements with clients or vendors. Remember that personal Amex card Mr. H kept sliding across the table? I attached the receipt, flagged the charge as potential conflict of interest, and routed it straight to compliance. The third lever came from an unlikely place: finance. I filed an expense anomaly report for the wine bottle my boss expensed under client hospitality, even though the bar bill was already on Mr. H's personal card. It wasn't about the $240, it was about the mismatch. Mismatches trigger audits. Audits trigger questions. By noon, I'd planted 3 seeds. Meanwhile, I called the anonymous hotline for Mr. H's own company. Calm voice, steady details. Time, place, words he whispered, the fact my boss was present. I ended the call with one line: "You might want to check your hotel's hallway camera from that night." Then I hung up. At 3:40 p.m., my boss summoned me. He was leaning against his desk, arms folded, fake smile plastered on. "Listen," he said, "I know Friday got tense. Let's reset. Focus on what matters." "What matters," I said, "is that I've been removed from the deck I built." He gave a half shrug. "It's not personal. You'll get other opportunities. But if you make waves now, people will start asking if you're difficult." I stared at him, memorizing every word. "Are you saying my career depends on being quiet?" His eyes flickered. "I'm saying pick your battles." That was enough. That sentence alone became Exhibit 4. The retaliation escalated quickly. The next day, a draft performance plan landed in my inbox, thinly veiled punishment dressed as coaching. It claimed I lacked collaboration skills. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't infuriating. I responded by attaching 3 years of performance reviews, all glowing, and CCing HR with the subject line: Concern retaliatory action post-protected activity. The silence after that was deafening. Then the first domino fell. Procurement froze the renewal. Official reason: pending review of vendor ethics. My boss stormed past my desk, face red, slamming his office door. An hour later, I overheard him on the phone, voice sharp. Who the hell tipped them off? I kept typing, steady and silent. By Thursday, compliance had scheduled interviews. By Friday, legal was involved. What had started as a single disgusting whisper over dinner was now an official inquiry stretching across 2 corporations. And I wasn't just the target anymore. I was the witness holding the receipts. For the first time, I felt the shift. The power wasn't theirs alone. It was moving, and they had no idea how much more I had documented. They invited me to a meeting to scare me. But the moment I walked into that glass-walled conference room, I realized they'd made a mistake. They'd put everyone in the same room: the boss, HR, compliance, legal, thinking the weight of titles would crush me. What they didn't expect was that I'd brought the receipts. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. My boss sat at the head of the table, arms folded like a king on a flimsy throne. HR manager to his left, flipping through a notebook with that neutral smile that hides sharp edges. Compliance director across from me, already typing on her laptop. Legal counsel dialed in on the screen, her face pixelated but her tone crisp. "Thanks for joining us," HR began. "We'd like to clarify a few points regarding the events of last week." My boss leaned forward, smirking. "This doesn't need to be adversarial. We're just trying to understand your perspective." I placed my folder on the table, sliding it open with deliberate calm. Inside were printouts, emails, receipts, Slack screenshots. My phone lay face down beside it, recorder ready. "Perspective isn't the issue," I said. "Documentation is." I started with the bar invite. Date, time, location. The fact I was the only non-executive listed. Then the email sent at 1:17 a.m. about confirming hotel bar availability. I moved on to the wine receipt, mismatched against the client's personal Amex bill. Every piece had a timestamp, every page marked. My boss shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. "You're reading too much into—" "Please don't interrupt." Legal cut in from the screen. Her tone was ice. "We need the full chronology." So I gave it to them, step by step, detail by detail, until the room was silent, except for the click of compliance typing faster and faster. Then I played the audio clip, the muffled clink of glasses, the client's hand brushing mine, his whisper, "Your promotion depends on how flexible you are after dinner," followed by my boss's chuckle. "We're all adults here." The words hung in the air like smoke. HR cleared her throat, eyes flicking toward my boss. "Do you deny making that statement?" she asked. He stammered. I don't recall." But compliance wasn't looking at him anymore. She was scrolling through her screen, frowning. "Interesting," she said. "It seems there were multiple expense submissions from your account tied to client hospitality that don't match corporate card activity, including luxury travel last quarter." My boss's face drained of color. That's not relevant." "It's very relevant," Legal interrupted, "especially combined with the undisclosed bar meetings and this recording." The silence stretched. My boss's smirk was gone, replaced by sweat at his temples. He tried one last angle, turning to me. "Look, if we make this a big deal, we lose the client. That hurts everyone. You don't want to be the reason people lose jobs, do you?" I met his eyes, steady. "The reason we're here isn't me. It's you. And him?" For the first time, he looked small in that chair. Compliance closed her laptop with a sharp snap. "We'll be putting you on administrative leave, effective immediately. Further investigation will determine next steps." HR nodded, voice flat. "You're excused." He opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came out. Security arrived within minutes, escorting him out of the building. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound louder than any applause. The client wasn't spared either. By the end of that week, our company invoked the morals clause in the contract, voiding the renewal and triggering liquidated damages. Millions gone in an instant. Word spread fast. His own board opened an inquiry, and whispers of suspension circulated through industry channels. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just gathered my folder, slid it back into my bag, and walked out of that room. On my way home, I passed the hotel bar where it had all started. The neon sign flickered again, buzzing faintly in the night air. For the first time, I didn't feel dread when I looked at it. I just kept walking. They thought they'd scare me into silence. Instead, they handed me the stage, and I'd used it to show everyone the truth. I thought the win would be the apology, or maybe the sight of my boss being escorted out, his tie askew and his face pale. But that was just the beginning. The real victory came later, in ways neither of them could have predicted. 2 weeks after that meeting, HR called me back in. Different tone this time. Warm, careful, almost deferential. "We've concluded our review," they said. "Your complaint was substantiated. The manager has been terminated for cause. The client, well, they won't be renewing. But we want to recognize your integrity in handling this situation." Integrity. That's what they called it. I called it survival. Then came the offer. A new role, a shiny title, Director of Strategic Accounts. A seat at the table they tried to keep me from. They pitched it as a reward, as proof they valued me. But I'd learned better. I knew it wasn't generosity, it was damage control. They wanted to keep me close, to stop me from walking out the door with everything I knew. So I smiled, asked for time to think it over, and walked straight into my apartment that night to draft emails to 2 rival firms. I didn't just tell them I was looking. I attached the press clipping where our company disclosed ethical contract termination and mentioned my role in the investigation. Within a week, recruiters were circling. Within 2, I had competing offers on the table, both higher, both cleaner, both free of the shadows I'd just crawled out from. When I went back to my company, I didn't accept or reject their offer. I negotiated a raise, policy changes, formal safeguards. I demanded chaperoned client dinners, dual sign-off for after-hours meetings, mandatory vendor ethics disclosures, not just for me, for everyone. If they wanted to keep me, they had to fix the system that enabled all of this. And here's the twist. They agreed. They didn't have a choice. Too much was at stake. Too much noise already swirling outside their walls. As for me, I stayed just long enough to implement those changes, to watch the new managers stumble through training modules I wrote myself. Then I handed in my notice, letter crisp, head high, and walked into the arms of a competitor who offered me more money, more respect, and no ghosts in the conference rooms. The client, suspended by his board, stripped of his title, whispered about at every industry dinner where people pretended not to gossip. My boss? Blacklisted, reputation scorched, last I heard trying to consult freelance for companies too desperate to Google. And me? I kept every file, every note, every policy highlighted in neon, not as weapons, as reminders, because silence had been their business model, and I'd broken it. The last line of the handbook I used to bring them down still sticks with me. I underlined it twice before sliding it across the desk in my final meeting. Silence in the face of misconduct will itself be treated as misconduct. That silence isn't mine anymore. So if you've ever been told to pick your battles, hear me clearly. Sometimes the battle isn't just yours. Sometimes fighting back means everyone after you doesn't have to fight the same war. And that, more than the apology, was the win.